Hey, it's PMR. I wanted to talk to you about the best lens for sports photography. Let's get into it. Typically, people, when they start out in sports photography, they use what they have. And if they're lucky, they have a crop body sensor or even a full frame camera. But typically, they start out with a kit zoom. And that zoom is usually a 75 to 300 or a 70 to 350 or something in that range. Those lenses are all 5.6 apertures or slower, which means they don't let in a lot of light. And eventually, if people keep working at it and working at it and work at it, and believe me, sports photography takes a lot of practice, a lot of games, a lot of matches, over and over and over again, repetition. This is where you start getting good. And when you start getting good, you get frustrated because the pictures are not looking as good as you know they could be. And then you finally realize that it's really not you, and it's maybe not the camera, but it's the lens, and that the lens is actually the thing that's holding you back. And so what usually happens is people will gravitate towards the 7200 2.8 in whatever system they happen to be in. Now, the 72.8 is great because it gives you a 2.8, what's called a static aperture lens. So when you zoom in and out, it's not changing how much light it's letting in and out of the lens. Static aperture lenses stay at the same aperture no matter where you're zoomed. And so these are much, much better and more appropriate for shooting sports at night or in dark gyms or under lights or whatever. So people typically start with a 7200 2.8 or a 70 to 180 2.8 or something like that. Now, not all 7200 2.8 lenses are created equal. Some of them will take teleconverters, like the 1.4 or the 2X. Some of them do not. And this is a problem. So if you bought say the Tamron 70 to 180 and you really like it, you can't get beyond 180 millimeter. There is no teleconverter that will help you get that lens to be anything other than it is. But in the pro lines of Canon, Nikon, Sony, the teleconverters will fit on and work on the 7200 2.8. So in effect, this lens with a 1.4 attached becomes effectively a 100 to 300, which is really good. It's much, much better. Or they go to a 2X converter if you're shooting field sports like lacrosse or soccer, American football in the daytime, baseball in the daytime. The 2X is great because now you go from a 140 to a 400 millimeter 5.6. And of course, if you're shooting outfielders, 400 is really low, but it gets the job done to some extent. But then you kind of hit a wall because there's really nothing else you can do with the 7200 2.8 with these two converters. You're kind of stuck there. The other reality is that teleconverters don't change the focal length of the lens. They only change its field of view. So even when you have a 2X converter on a 7200, you have the field of view of a 400 millimeter, but you do not have a 400 millimeter lens with the characteristics of that lens, which means you're not changing depth of field at all when you add a teleconverter. So what happens is you get your 7200 2.8, you get your teleconverter, and the backgrounds are really busy and they fight with your primary image, especially the further away your subject is, the worse that gets. So the sidelines get really convoluted and complicated. It's just hard. And so then you kind of think, well, I really need a longer lens. Now, in the Sony ecosystem, the next lens that people typically buy to do field sports especially is the 200 to 600G, which is an awesome lens. It's 200 to 600 millimeter zoom. And when you're zoomed into 600 millimeter, it is a real 600 millimeter focal length lens. Even that lens at 400 millimeter will have less depth of field than a 7200 2.8 with a 1.4 or 2X. So it's a huge, big add now. The problem is if you're shooting at night at all, or if you're shooting multiple sports and you're going from basketball, where this is great, and you go into football, where this is pretty good, and then you go from football into soccer and the spring sports, now your 7200, it's lacking. So people typically go 7200 2.8, then they get a 2 to 6 or some kind of super zoom, a Sigma or Tamron or whatever, but you're still stuck at 5.6 or 6.3 or even 6.7 aperture. And that's not great. At this point, people have been through the 70 to 300 or 75 to 300. Then they've gone and bought the 7200 2.8. Maybe they bought one or even both of the teleconverters. Now they've gone and got a super zoom, but they're still not happy with especially their nighttime stuff. Now the daytime, maybe, for golf, the 2 to 6 is great, but for field sports where there's people on the sidelines instead of pretty trees and ponds and blue skies and stuff like that in the background of golf, you're kind of screwed. And so at that point, people kind of go, well, I really want to have the next level of eye candy. And that is right here, the 300 2.8. So the 300 2.8, the 100 to 300 2.8, the 120 to 300 2.8, or just a 300 prime, this is a fantastic way to get professional looking results without breaking the bank, because the 400 2.8 is a lot more money. In the Sony system, the 400 2.8 is $11,000. This is literally $6,000, so it's half price. The 300 2.8 is the consummate sports lens. It's like the minimum you can get away with for everything, like auto sports or any kind of field sports, basketball, football, even like things like judo and karate, whatever, anything indoors, wrestling. 300 2.8 is really going to get you professional results every time out. Now, here's the crazy part of this video. What I think people should think about doing is, instead of doing the 7200 and the converters and then buy the 2 to 6, just buy the 300 2.8 right off the bat. I think you'd be better off. I think there's a case to be made for having a 300 2.8 and a 135 1.8 as your primary sports lenses and bypass the 200 to 600 and the 7200 altogether. Prime lenses are always going to outperform zooms. They just are. And they're lighter, and they're typically faster. So this whole thing, this whole video is really about putting your money in the best place you can earlier than you do typically. Now, the only advantage to this way, with you go 7200, the converters, and then the 2 to 6, is that you're not spending the money all at once. And I understand how difficult it is to get $6,000 together and to justify that. But this lens, is not inexpensive. The teleconverters are $550 a piece. So this is $1,100 right here. You add to that $2,000 200 to 600G, and all of a sudden you're really, really close to what this costs in the first place at $59.98. I think, and in my opinion, that most people that are getting into sports photography are going to do much better right out of the gate if they just bought a 300 2.8 first. And really, I think it's a better lens to have instead of a 7200. Yeah, you give up, the zoom, you give up that flexibility, but the images you can make with this are so much better than the images you can make with this, and especially this with converters, or the 2 to 6 with the slow lens. So I think, if you had the ability, I think if you talk to a lot of sports photographers, that have been doing this for a number of years, if you said to them, hey, would you rather have a 300 2.8 or a 7200? I think a lot of them would say, well, man, now that I have a 300 2.8, I use it all the time. And I use this only on goal or whatever. This video is all about trying to look ahead and make the best decision for getting the best results. And I really believe with all my heart, I think that this is the answer more than anything else. And remember, people right now, like, Sony in particular, and Canon's going crazy with new models, new cameras and stuff. Glass is glass. If you're upgrading your camera every 2 years and you're still stuck with a 7200, you're probably not doing the right thing. Upgrading your glass is of paramount importance. If I had a choice of shooting an SEC game or an NFL game with an A9 III that can go 120 frames a second with a 7200, or using an A7 IV in a 300 2.8, I'm going this way every single time. I'm going to give up, 90 frames a second. No, I'm going to give 110 frames per second to get 10 frames per second, because I know the results of this lens is going to outperform what I get with that lens. So disagree, agree, whatever, put your comments below, questions. But man, I think when you're starting out, it's just better to get the thing you need the most right away. easy for me to say I'm a pro and I can justify these lenses. I know a lot of people aren't making money with what they're doing, but at the end of the day, you're going to spend this amount of money to get the 7200 2.8, the two converters, the 2-to-6, and then you're looking at the 300 2.8 at $59.98. The difference in the money is so negligible. You're better off to go straight to the king. Thanks for watching.